In every society, whether it is real or fictional, medieval or contemporary, the greatest threats to the status quo are those few independent-minded individuals who don't consider it beyond their capacity to enact radical change. For them, it is not the desire for grandeur that drives their ambitions, but their own curiosities and free intellect that poses a great threat to the powers that be. In the fictional world of One Piece, where the seas are ruled by the authoritarian whims of the world government, such individuals are hunted down vigorously. Not a shred of opposition to the government is allowed, and the scope for intellectual adventurism remains confined within the narrow limits set by those deceptive demons in power. For the scientist Dr. Vegapunk, however, such limits hold no importance when compared to the grand ambitions of science and technology. This rebel scientist initially worked under the auspices of his now sworn enemies. He was the chief scientist for the world government, helping them in greatly enhancing their military capacity by building the pacifistas and seraphims. Using his old friend Kuma's sacrifice, Vegapunk initially created the pacifistas as tools that are at the disposal of Marines, and which can be used to spread peace around the world, hence the name. However, these weapons were misused by Vegapunk's contractors, who used them in wars, buster calls, and all sorts of activities which have furthered the government's violent grip over the world. His second invention, the seraphims, clones that are replicas of the 7 warlords of the seas, have faced a similar fate. There are real-world examples, of course, of scientists working with governments that misuse their inventions in complete contravention to their original intention. Take Elon Musk's relationship with the American government, for example. Though not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, Elon has been on the receiving end of some rather disappointing hypocrisy of the American state. Despite his focus on electrical vehicles, environmentally sustainable transport, and space exploration, the US government has not relented in its support for oil tycoons and profiteers who remain front and center of the country's drive for greater returns to such shareholders. To be accurate, Vegapunk was never really a fan of the government, and it would be unfair to say that he would be shocked to see the government use his inventions for evil and greedy deeds. He was an ally of the Revolutionary Dragon, after all. Still, the Doctor decided to enter a tense alliance with his enemies. Why would he do that? Well, the answer is shocking and reveals that Vegapunk was never really a cog in the government machine, but actually a rebel working behind the scenes to take down his contractors. Current events in Egghead have signaled to readers that Vegapunk was actually spending his free time on the Future Island researching the Void Century. Shrouded in mystery, these are the 100 years of history that ended with the world government standing out as the uncontested ruler of the 4 seas. Research on this century is heavily censored, and anytime those in power get even a whiff that research on the Void Century is taking place, they don't hold back. Look at Ohara, for example. The Marines literally genocided the entire island just because there was suspicion of research into the Void Century. Similarly, now that the 5 elders know about Vegapunk's secret hobby, they have completely turned against him and have put a massive bounty on his head. Talk about no love lost. The government does not care for Vegapunk's intellect, and the great potential he holds for their technological progress. Their alliance with him proved to be entirely transactional, and the moment he began to toe away from the line set out for him, the government decided to have him assassinated. Vegapunk was always a rebel scientist, but the WG's antagonism towards his work added to his resolve, and he has by now fully embraced the subversive label put onto him. This is evident from his support for the Straw Hat Pirates, Bonnie, and Kuma. The Doctor has made it the final mission of his life to ensure they escape Egghead safely, while the latter themselves are resolute in protecting him from the shackles of Elder Saturn and Admiral Kizaru, who have been sent out to assassinate him. Kizaru is incredibly interesting in this entire story because even though he holds fond and friendly feelings towards Vegapunk, he considers himself a cog in the machine of the government and is willing to go the extra mile to ensure his death, even though he does feel a little sad about it. The real-world equivalent of Vegapunk hasn't been the target of any assassinations, to be sure, but he has been the victim of slander and ostracism owing to the radical potential his ideas hold. Musk has become a punching bag for all those who despise billionaires, especially with his purchase of the social media app known as Twitter. His ownership of Twitter has been accompanied with lots of problems, yes, but it has also been the freest the app has ever been. Censorship is practically non-existent in this civil society jungle, and features such as community notes have allowed users to check for misinformation while being citizen journalists in their own right. Features like these have been heavily criticized, especially by governments around the world, who use news outlets to spread blatant misinformation and who have a strong proclivity towards censorship. For example, the app has become very important in broadcasting global atrocities such as the events taking place in Gaza, and it has been exposed to the world the level of lies used by the opposing government in obfuscating their atrocities. Elon, however, has been at the center of criticism and has been essentially ostracized from the rest of the billionaire community and his own government. A recent example of this is the ongoing feud between Elon and Disney CEO Bob Iger, when the latter stopped advertising on X. This was a clear move displaying Bob's disagreement with Elon's views, but maybe he forgot who he was dealing with. When questioned about this conflict, Elon had the most savage reply. Don't advertise. He said before targeting Iger directly, if someone is going to try to blackmail me with advertising, blackmail me with money, go F yourself. Another, more blatant example of Elon's rebellious nature is in his approach towards China, a country that is rapidly emerging as a rival to American hegemony and economic domination over the world. Despite pleas by the US government, Musk has been relentless in supporting economic engagement between China and the US, and this has earned him the ire of America's political establishment that has rapidly turned away their support for his plans like Tesla and SpaceX. In fact, his relentless support has ostracized him to the point where his government has once again turned towards oil-producing companies to meet their energy needs, turning away from his relatively more environmentally sustainable solutions. Going back to Vegapunk, his rebelliousness as a scientist was never in doubt. As an intellectual in a world that actively stifles intellectual thought, he emerged as a constant source of anxiety for the ever-oppressive world government. Their anxieties were not all unfounded, since Vegapunk already incorporated certain mechanisms into inventions such as the pacifistas that went against the demands of the elders. For example, his moral conscience tormented him with the thought of these robots that resembled his friend Kuma to be the ones that killed Kuma's daughter, the pirate Bonnie. For this reason, he made it so that Bonnie has the ultimate control over the commands of the pacifista, bypassing even the 5 elders of the seas. This actually allowed Bonnie to command the robots being used by the government for their buster call on Egghead to turn against the government itself. Perhaps Saint Saturn, who was watching in disbelief as these events unfold, realized that one can never trust a scientist so wholeheartedly. Those who have an independent mind cannot be stopped even by entities that are controlled by the strongest demons in the world. In addition to this, Vegapunk's exploration of the Void Century isn't something too out of the blue when one considers the type of person he is. Not only was he a witness to the tragedy of O'Hara, which touched him deeply on a human level, but he's a scientist with an insatiable thirst for knowledge. When rulers come and actively deny and forbid its people to research something, whether it's an object, an area of science, or a historical period like the Void Century, individuals like Vegapunk would be even more encouraged to risk their lives to discover the secret behind those things. This shows also the perpetually insecure nature of the world government, which has to suppress its own history to be able to maintain its power. It is only a matter of time before such a regime is to topple for good. It is undeniable that totalitarian regimes stifle creativity and growth to maintain their own extractive positions in society. However, such regimes are incredibly unstable, despite the perception that they may give off outward order, just because of the fact that they actively suppress something that is fundamental in human nature, the quest for creativity and knowledge. This nature is embodied by the rebel scientist Vegapunk, who, despite being kept on a leash by the government, has still managed to turn the world upside down with his explorations and projects. A similar analysis applies to Elon Musk, who has been able to popularize such resistance to seemingly uncontested powers like the oil tycoons and the genocidal governments of the world, that the tide opened up is impossible to be tapered off just by ostracizing him or taking support away from him. This is because of the very simple fact that Musk is only one very flawed individual. It is what he represents and the ideas that he has opened up which represent such an existential threat to the powers that rule our world. He may not even be a revolutionary himself, but he has tapped into those revolutionary aspects of human nature that have affected billions beyond him as well. It is for this reason that rebel scientists themselves hold such a problematic space in the lives of the powerful. They give them sleepless nights not because this one person, say Vegapunk, might deliver freedom to the world by exploring the suppressed void centuries history, but because he is only the extreme embodiment of an instinct that exists in everyone. And these are instincts of subversion and rebellion that are inherent within a human that craves freedom, creativity, and innovation. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell to be notified of any latest uploads. That said, see you in the next one.